Welcome to another edition of Be the Change Georgia, where we amplify the voices of the inspiring business leaders surrounding the B Corp and social impact movements across the Southeast to help you learn how to build your legacy at the intersection of people, planet, purpose, and profit. Today, there are more than 8,000 B Corps in over 80 countries and 180 different industries, unified by one common goal: transforming the global economy to benefit all people, communities, and the planet. If you want to learn how to plug into our purpose-driven business community alongside the inspiring leaders we feature on this show, check us out at blocalgeorgia.com or on Instagram or Facebook at blocalgeorgia, and we'll hope to meet you at our next event. Today, you'll have the opportunity to learn from Christopher Marquis, the Sinyi Professor at the University of Cambridge and author of The Profiteers: How Business Privatizes Profits and Socializes Costs. Chris's research examines business sustainability and social entrepreneurship, and he is passionate about how academic research can help people around the world address some of the biggest crises of our day, including climate change, inequality, and discrimination. In this episode, Chris and I discuss the B Corp movement and its impact on business as a force for good. And in his argument for the adoption of B Corp principles, Chris emphasizes the importance of future-proofing business, engaging both your employees and your consumers, and driving investor interest. Stay tuned as we delve into how the B Corp movement is redefining success in business and paving the way for a more sustainable future. Enjoy. Chris Marquis, welcome to Be the Change Georgia. Excited to finally have you on. How you doing today?
Totally. Thanks so much, Nathan. Doing good. Very excited to be talking to you.
Yeah, no, this comes full circle. I think it was 2020. Carolina Miranda and I won the Community Builder of the Year award, and you won. What did you win that year? You won something from B Lab when it was all like a Zoom celebration.
Yeah, totally. It was I forget, and it's a little tiny statue thing, and I forget what the award was.
I just remember. I feel like you were like, where were you? Because you jumped on that Zoom to accept your award, and I'm like, was he on the side of like an interstate? Like
I was on the road actually. I forget where I was driving, but yeah, I pulled over at a rest stop, and I was doing it out of the back of my car. Actually, I had the computer sort of up on the trunk.
Oh, that's classic. The little things we remember, and something probably useful that I forgot. So, well, I'm excited to have you on today. Talk about the new book, talk about the B Corp movement, talk about all the fun stuff, and maybe we'll even tease that you'll be in Atlanta in September. As I wore my Build Southeast shirt that people can't see because mainly this is audio. But anyway, excited to have you on and excited to get into it. So,
yeah,
let's talk about let's talk about the book, but let's also talk about you, because you're a professor. So I think everybody we have on the show is primarily, I'm thinking to this point, is a business owner. Maybe we've had a couple nonprofit professionals, but I think you might be our first professor. So
yeah.
Excited for that.
Thank you. I'm glad to be contributing from an academic standpoint. But this is something, business as a force for good is something I've been passionate about and researching for 20 plus years now. So I've engaged with so many folks in the B Corp community, and it's really an honor to be able to, be part of actually helping communicate the importance of business as a real engine for social and environmental performance. And even though I'm a professor and typically have studied this, just recently, actually, one of the organizations I work for at Cambridge was certified as a B Corp, which I was involved in, which was super exciting. It's the executive education arm of the university actually is organized as a corporation. And after I got here, I was talking to people there, gave them my book, Better Business. And one of the folks had this insight that, wow, we do a lot of stuff on sustainability already. We should become a B Corp. And it took about 2 years. And just in the last couple of weeks, the final certification went through. We're on the website. And so now I'm actually sort of gone full circle myself. I'm actually an employee of a B Corp in addition to being professor.
Oh, that's awesome. That is full circle. And you're in the UK where this market is like, I mean, I think we just hit 2,500 in North America, but the UK's already hit like 1,000, which is,
1,500. Yeah.
oh, wow. That's one of
Yeah.
those slides I have to keep updating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, and people have asked, I get to ask that question a lot sometimes when I speak and I'm talking about the UK. And actually, it was a journalism class last year at UGA. I was guest lecturing. And of course, journalists, they're just, well, why do you think it's taken off in the UK, but not other parts of Europe? And I'm like, um, it's like, I don't know. I've never been asked that. And I started thinking, I'm like, well,
Yeah.
Germany, there's a lot of countries in Europe that have that similar, I mean, Germany's been recycling since the 60s. And heaven
Sure.
forbid you throw green glass in the brown glass bin. A little Oma comes out and yells at you to separate your
Right.
glass. But,
Totally.
I
Serious
mean,
business there.
yo, the only thing I could chalk it up to was the language was about it that I could think of was maybe that it was easy to adopt early for them because it was already in English. But it's incredible, and
Yeah.
you're seeing it firsthand over there.
Totally. And I think, as I've been studying a lot of, this around the globe, I think English is one of the things that actually helped. It gets embedded early. Another thing is, I think the local entrepreneurs that are engaged in the B Corp movement, as you see places where it's really taken off, like Italy is another place where it's really taken off, and I think that's totally a result of these amazing entrepreneurs there that have gone and made got benefit. The first non-U.S. benefit corporation jurisdiction was in Italy, and so I think that in the UK there's this huge interest and passion around business as a force for good. There's predating the B Corp movement, there are these community interest corporations which are, is another sort of form of business that, they're like profit capped and sort of designed to actually be a business, but actually give the social good. So maybe the idea was already sort of in the air in some ways. I think there's about 15 or 20,000 of those community interest corps called KICs. So anyway, aside from that, I can't think of any other reason, but it's definitely something where people know B Corps and are passionate about it.
Yeah, no, it's super cool. I mean, what I'm trying to build in the Southeast is just that awareness and that excitement, and that how do we continue to build this thing together? But you need that community passion, honestly. For lack of a better
Right.
term, there's nothing. It's just you need those people on the ground that are excited about this. And I think too many of us wait for B Lab to do that work for us, forgetting that it is a nonprofit doing its best.
Right. And I think the model, as I've seen it, is really they want it to be driven by entrepreneurs. They want it to be localized to different regions. So System of Bay obviously is this amazing success in Latin America. There's a variety in Asia. There's a growing set of B Corp movements. I think even in the U.S. I mean, you look at Colorado has a developed ecosystem in the southeast. I think the stuff you're doing in Atlanta and Georgia area is great. You have obviously North Carolina, even though they are one of the few states that does not pass benefit corporation law. The actual B Corp community, I think, driven from the education side with Jessica Thomas, with Eric Henry, I think, is he the one at
Yep, I'm
very
wearing an Eric
early.
Henry T-shirt right now.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic! Yeah, so I think that it is having these real passionate entrepreneurs it is what actually gets the movement going because you talk to your networks, you have events. I think that entrepreneurship is a real locally driven phenomenon.
People have said that you have to be careful hanging out with me because you leave the conversation. Your company's certified as a B Corp. I need to get that on a
Yeah.
T-shirt. Well, let's bring it back a little bit because one of the reasons I'm excited to have you on is, we recently had John Williams, who's a business owner in Athens, Georgia, on the podcast, and he summed up that like ROI piece so well as far as making that business case. And I think one of the advantages of having you as a part of this movement as somebody who's researching it is that ability to make the data driven along with the anecdotal evidence, along with company examples to make that academic, here is what is actually happening, here's the data, here's why this is good for business. So can you tell people about your work and then your research, but also, and it's funny too, because like the books, there's like two of them are about the B Corp movement, and one is Mao and Markets, the Communist Roots of Chinese Enterprise, which is a whole other podcast I want to go into with
Sure.
you.
Yeah. So yeah. So as you mentioned, I have this book, Better Business. The subtitle is How the B Corp Movement is Remaking Capitalism. And the movement piece of that is really conscious and relates very much to what we were just, talking about actually being entrepreneurs, and not just even business entrepreneurs, but policy entrepreneurs, academic entrepreneurs, because it's really about changing the system. It's not just about adding numbers of B Corps, although B Corps are amazing, and it's amazing to see how in the last few years the number has really skyrocketed. But as a rigorous certification, the number of B Corps is never going to be super high. Probably, I mean, there's millions of businesses in the world. There's going to be maybe tens of thousands of B Corps. But the key thing, I think, is the systems that this community is creating around accountability. So the B impact assessment and ESG measurement and performance. This is something that is good for all companies. I know that sometimes those sort of letters get sort of up in political conversation, but I do think that hopefully that will die down a bit, because it's not about some, I don't know, sort of progressive, liberal agenda. It's actually about creating better businesses. And this is why I called my book Better Business, because so many of the companies I talk to and entrepreneurs I talk to said, I really believe in the social and environmental impact. And that's what got me into this. But I came out of it a better business. And better business means, I mean, you have better operations and procedures in place that actually help your company for the long term. And I think of it as sort of almost like a future proofing type of activity, where you're actually establishing a much more solid, lower risk type of business. And so I think that is a real core sort of theme from Better Business.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's funny. Yeah, you mentioned the letters. It's tricky down here in the South.
Yeah, I
But
can imagine.
but at the end of the day, it really is, you kind of said like the toothpaste is out of the tube. I mean, and you look at like what Gen Z values and stuff, like, and that's kind of what John was talking about, was recruiting this next generation of employees. Like, I went after this certification because to them, this is like this, they can now see that our commitment is real, that it's not just a
Totally.
really good marketing pitch on our website, that, whether you call it whatever you want to call it, I've started calling what the intentional growth economy is what I've replaced the three of the letters with. And then ESG, I've just moved to like, hey, good business. I have a shirt from Kentucky, from an organization up there that's run by a B Corp, and it just says "Good business, y'all." And that's kind of what I replaced the ESG with. But
Sure. Yeah.
how did that research, or did that research of writing that book, did that process lead you to the Profiteers, which is your new book that's coming out?
Yeah, very much so. It's very, very connected. And sometimes people have said to me, Better Business and the Profiteers, this doesn't seem like the same person would write both of these books. And actually, the underlying message of both the books is the same. And it is that business is the most powerful, in my opinion, engine for social and environmental good. But there are a lot of barriers in place to make that happen. And in the Profiteers, I lean a little bit more into the barriers around, the way markets and law are set up that really encourage companies to externalize their costs. This idea of externalities, which is in economics, and it's basically the idea summarized in the subtitle of the book. It's called how business privatizes profit and socializes costs. So many things, from carbon emissions to waste in the world, plastic, these are all things that, business that have real costs, not just health costs, but also financial costs to society and to our environment. But business doesn't have to pay those. I mean, it's sort of they get sort of a free lunch. And so really, I think, reforming some of these systems so that, businesses will be on a more sort of even playing field to sort of do good is a big focus of the Profiteers. And so very much, as I was out talking a lot about better business, I got a lot of questions about, this overall economic and sort of political societal system that business is embedded in, which led me to write this book, The Profiteers.
That's super cool. Yeah, I mean, I think about even some of the companies for years paying minimum wage, and it's like all their employees are on, need food stamps or need financial
Right.
assistance, which then is
Exactly. This is exactly. It's the public is paying for the company's profits, basically.
wow. Can't wait for that to come out. I'm excited. That's one of the reasons you're coming to Build too, is to talk about that and hopefully get the book
Totally. Yeah.
this book in the hands of, I think it's why you're passionate about what you do and why I'm passionate about what I do. I mean, I'm just a lowly part-time lecturer. I've learned not to call myself a professor because I do not have a PhD, but I love that, like getting that aha moment out of the students and getting to see when that light bulb kind of turns on and they realize not just, okay, the system's kind of broken, but it's that light bulb of like, how do we, it can be fixed. We, like it's going to take some work, but this is, especially with a bunch of room full of MBAs that I'm teaching to, it's like, here is kind of this playbook that this B Corp, that the assessment has given us on
Yeah.
how to be a change maker inside whatever company I go to. Even if, like you said earlier, not every company, there's millions of companies. Like a lot of the ones we're Fortune 500 companies we're sending them to in Atlanta aren't going to certify, but they have this playbook for change.
Yeah, and they can become. I mean, they can actually work on becoming better. I mean, and I think that's it's a way to help all companies. Both the BIA, but then also some of the corporate governance. Benefit Corporation and the other different legal innovations that have been popping up around the world. So I agree, and it's great to hear your students, sort of see that and are resonating with it.
You have to get them to pivot from the burn it all down to the pack a lunch bill and get to work attitude, but I like their energy. So you just touched on something too about around the world and trying to think. Yeah, you probably are our first like truly international. It's funny, for the first year or so of this podcast, I only did Georgia. And then once I started running Build Southeast, I started expanding to bring in some really cool people from the region. But you're our first international guest, and I know you just got back from Vietnam. You wrote a book on the Chinese enterprise. What do you see around the world as far as not just the B Corp movement, but the global landscape of that and just capitalism as a whole? And are there any unique challenges or success stories from other regions? We talked about Italy, we talked about the UK, but what else are you seeing in your travels, in your research, and now obviously living as an expat?
Yeah, no, I mean, and obviously your listeners can tell I'm not English. I'm American. Frequently I'll get invited someplace, and people just, I guess, go from the web, and I show up and I have an American accent, and I don't like wear these academic robes, and they seem a little disappointed they're not getting the true Cambridge Cambridge professor experience. But one of the things, and it might sound a little bit, I don't know, dry and boring, but it's something that I'm getting a lot from. One of the things I do through this new B Corp, actually, of the Cambridge Judge Business School Executive Education, is teach a huge cross section of global leaders on sustainability. It is actually labeled ESG, although we'll keep away. But the thing that is really driving a lot of that, and they're very concerned about, are a lot of the changes in the EU around sort of accountability or on ESG issues. And this, I think, is going to be a big game changer. They're just sort of starting to get implemented. There's one called the CSRD, which is about corporate accountability and what companies have to report on. Similar to the SEC legislation that was got a little derailed around the Scope 3 emissions, but this is very rigorous. The directors and corporate leaders will be legally on the line, so they can be sued if they actually report things that are not not correct. And it goes very, very far in that any company that is doing business in the EU, their entire corporation will eventually have to report on this. It'll take a number of years for this to get phased in. The first set of companies actually are going to have to report in 2024, but by 2028, like for instance, if you have a company and you're doing business in the EU, you will have to report on your global footprint. And so I think that the globalization, how interconnected business is, even though there's been deglobalization, I think there's still tremendous, sort of business that's globalized. I think that these things like the SEC rules won't really matter because actually most reasonably sized American companies will need to actually fulfill these CSRD issues. And this is spilling over. I was in Malaysia not that long ago, and I got summoned to one of the trade minister's office. I didn't know who this was. He heard I was in town and what some of the things I was talking about. I talked with some local B Corps. I talked with some impact investors, talked with a YPO group there. And he wanted to talk about the B impact assessment and corporate accountability mechanisms because, Malaysia is a country that has a lot of small, medium-sized enterprises that are in the supply chains of companies in Europe and elsewhere. And they realize that with this new Scope 3 scrutiny in the EU, that they're going to be on the hook in the next year or so. So they wanted to get ahead of this as competitiveness for their country. So I think that, in the EU, there's been a number of media reports recently on their green claims legislation. So a number of companies have been sued for greenwashing, basically. So companies are going to have to be, if they, are saying things about the environmental performance of their products, they have to really be able to back them up. So I think this is something that is on the horizon, that is happening as we speak in the EU. But as a result, it's going to be very serious issues on the horizon of many companies, throughout the world in the coming years.
Wow, that's really insightful, and it's funny because it's just a perfect segue into like the journey of how we change capitalism and how we fix this. And like Nespresso was recently certified, and I was guest lecturing to a cohort of entrepreneurs at Techstars in Atlanta, and as soon as I said it, I saw arms fold, and I'm like, okay, I've done a lot of this body language stuff. Like I can tell, like, okay, well, what did I just say?
Yeah.
And I got basically as soon as you said that, I shut down and was not interested anymore. But as you're talking about what the EU is doing, like there is a journey to be embraced as we talk about like the Nespressos of like which previous sins are irredeemable, and how do we help these big multinationals clean up their supply chains and I don't know, pivot. They're turning an ocean
Sure.
line, but how do we need them to, if we're going to change capitalism, we need the multinationals. I mean, I'd love to say that my little one employee company is going to change the world. I mean, at least I help companies certify, but we need more than just that. So how do you see the challenge of balancing the standards with kind of that big multinational movement and the cringiness that a lot of us still look at those companies with?
Yeah, I think we have to be very, very careful, but realistic, and also think about what's best for the world. I don't think these companies, I don't think it's possible for them to be B Corps, but the sort of real extreme version of this is that, a lot of, and actually a lot of these sustainability and ESG classes I teach actually have people from the fossil fuel companies, or sort of energy as they like to be called, now, because, fossil fuel doesn't sound very good. But, their argument is that a lot of, in a lot of transitions to, more sustainable, types of systems, be they renewable or maybe some sort of, carbon capture or whatever, if that, it needs a lot of the expertise actually in fossil fuel companies. And so this positions them really, really well to actually be, part of the solution. And I think, that seems like a little bit too slippery of a slope for me, given, everything that's been, about the, incredible disinformation they've been doing for decades. And, profiteering, if there's any example of profiteering, it's the, these fossil fuel companies. So, I say this with a, not sort of totally a bit of measure, I guess, but I do think we have to find ways to help some of these large companies actually transition their products and processes to be more sustainable. And I think the B Corp tools and processes are really helpful for all companies. I think they're going to be much more interested given many of these sort of like regulatory issues on the horizon. And so, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I have a strong statement on. You asked about what sort of past sins are irredeemable. I don't know if I have a strong position on where to draw the line on that, but in general, I think we need to be thinking, how can we actually help some of these large companies be more sustainable, but make sure that we're doing it in a really rigorous way so that, this doesn't end up being, the next greenwashing example.
Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest thing that the brand has right now is the trust. And if you ever lose that, it kind of erodes the value of the B.
Totally.
So yeah, it's interesting times. Talking about that too, I mean, it's one of the things that I keep pointing to when people are like, "What's the ROI? What's the ROI?" And I'm like, Nespresso's not doing it if they don't see a business value in it, which to me is kind of the canary in the coal mine that the ROI is there. I mean,
Right.
John said it, and John's got 150 employees across the Southeast. He's not Nespresso, but as I look at some of these big multinationals, the Danones, that I remember when Danone UK got certified, and then it was like Danone Netherlands, Danone Germany, and then Danone North America,
Sure.
and Nespresso getting it, and there's publicly traded companies. So from that perspective of like, what is the brand differentiator for these big multinationals, and why are they going out of their way to, I mean, you know the assessment. I mean, it's not getting easier with version 7 coming
Yeah.
next year. Like, what is it that's
Definitely not.
driving these
Yeah.
companies to do it?
Yeah. I mean, I do think that there is increasing brand lift. As I think about the ROI, and I do talk about this a lot with my students. I think it's real natural to sort of, think that, okay, the, B logo on a package, will help. And I'm not sure about the evidence so far on that. I do think that younger consumers are more interested in sustainable products. I almost see the consumer, if you think about what the return on this is, the consumer piece is like number 4 actually to me. So number 1 is this future-proofing better business idea that we've already talked about. I think that is really, I mean, so many of the companies that I've talked to have told me how powerful that is. And even a company like Danone, and I did a, very in-depth case study of Danone's North America, and I have a lot of stuff from Danone Global in both my previous and actually this new book. They see the BIA as like a really helpful management scorecard that they've integrated with their, whatever the sort of the KPI system they work on. They find that very useful. I think this is more and more important with these regulatory changes that are happening. I see. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the employee focus, which you've already mentioned. I think that we sometimes underestimate the sort of cost and importance of retaining and attracting talent. It's really easy to say that, but actually, people nowadays want to work for a company that stands for something, and they stay at companies that are actually treating their employees well and sort of living their values. And so I think that sort of number 2 on the ROI hierarchy, in my opinion, is employee impacts. Number 3 relates to investors. And this relates a little bit, I think, to why, it relates to the first 2, obviously, but Larry Fink has publicly backtracked all the things he was saying on, Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, that used to have these letters about companies should do more sort of climate, ESG, whatever. But I think, and again, I don't think he's necessarily caring about the environment, but actually going through these processes, actually having a purpose and values and mission and being accountable to that it's a question of being a better business, and investors know and see this. It's why I think now 1,000 or so B Corps have investment from leading venture capital companies. Many venture capital companies actually require their companies to do the BIA, whether they become B Corps or not. And I think this is, sort of like your sort of prima facie evidence examples of like why are Danone and Nespresso doing this? I mean, it's because it actually is good for the company. And then so investor, sort of interest is the third sort of on the hierarchy. And then fourth, I do think consumers are starting to care. And I hope that this is something that I think the community can play a big role in. So the more and more that companies and the big companies are out talking about this, putting the logo on products, getting it in front of consumers. I mean, I think that awareness is an issue, which is increasingly people are coming to know about it. But I think this is a growing area, but not one that has been totally cracked.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and it's funny too because if you go to like a like a Portland or a Burlington, Vermont, and you ask somebody like, "What's a B Corp?" A lot of people know what it is, but then I was
Yeah,
reminded last week in Alabama that a lot of people still, or they're like, "Oh, it's you can incorporate as a B Corp," and I'm like, that's the
right.
different. It's benefit
Totally.
corporation.
Yeah. That doesn't help either. I think actually it's I mean, I think there is a benefit corporation B Corp. I mean, I understandably can be confusing to people.
Yes. So, but it is,
Yeah.
but I am seeing it like even anecdotally in Georgia, where when I started this work in 2018, we had like 8 B Corps. Nobody knew what I was talking. I went into a conscious
Sure.
capitalism room, any room in the even with more progressive thought leaders as far as businesses and CEOs, and they had no idea what I was talking about. And now you're starting to walk into a room like, oh, the B Corp guy's here. What's up, Nathan? It's like, hey, he's here. But I don't have to explain it as much as I used to,
Sure.
which has been really cool. Um, what advice would you give to business leaders, entrepreneurs, consumers who want to actively contribute to this culture of social environmental responsibility within the business community? Like, how would you encourage them to adopt some of these B Corp principles on a broader scale? And again, kind of celebrating that, like, hey, doing one thing's better than doing no things.
So in many ways, I mean, we need the overall system to change, and I think that's not something that's going to happen, you know, by waving a wand. I mean, it's going to require all of us to be actively engaged in thinking about the world in the things that we buy. Also, very important politically. I think this is something where the votes that we have, that we cast, have real import on these issues. And I think that the 2024 election will be a big deal around social, environmental, sustainability issues. I think around the world there's elections happening, and I think that this frequently the environmental and social dimensions get politicized in ways that I think is unfortunate. Um, but I think focusing on what we need in the world, and that is you know companies, actors, individuals that have a deep consciousness around sustainability and being supportive of that, and listening to your podcast, talking to other people about great brands that you find are passionate about. And these could be B Corps, these could be some local brand in your city that is creating a lot of positive employment and change. And I mean, it doesn't have to be B Corps. I mean, I think B Corps are great because there's a third party that is verified, and there's a sort of a stamp, literally a stamp, which makes it easy to see. But we've all gone and talked to someone at a local store or restaurant or whatever, and we can tell people that we want to support. And so I think that being conscious in who you support is hugely essential in today's day and age.
It's like that old B Corp motto, the vote every day. Somewhere I'm like looking around. I have to have one of those
Exactly.
stickers
Yeah.
or something, so a button.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I'm like, I know that button's around.
Right.
Um, well, awesome. No, I mean, that's it. It is that supporting companies that that do. I mean, and that's kind of some of the frustrating parts right now, where you have Gen Z so outspoken, and then we won't go down this rabbit hole, but the whole like Shein, Temu thing, where it's like, we're
Sure.
like, oh, I've never seen a generation so passionate about the environment and kind of the hand they've been dealt. But then at the same time, it's like, ooh, but a $5 t-shirt. But you're starting to see more and more backlash, which again, coming back to the Europe thing, is kind of being pushed out of. I know France has been big on like, we're going to start taxing some of these imports and make it to the point where this isn't a sustainable business model anymore. So that's good to see those developments. But yeah, shop better, shop less. Shop less, and
Yeah.
when you do,
Yeah.
support a good brand. As I wear my Allbirds and my Bombas socks right now.
I got Allbirds and Boba socks on too, believe it or not.
It's my B Corp uniform, Patagonia jeans, TS Design
Yeah,
shirt.
yeah.
So, well, anyway, Chris, thank you for coming. I could keep this going for hours here, but I know you have other commitments, and we like to keep our listeners with a digestible, nice little commutable ride into work with a podcast in their ears. So, I just want to thank you for coming on, making the time to share some of your wisdom and research and insights. I think it's helpful to have that now you're working at a B Corp as well, but that non-practitioner
Right.
side, and more of the like, hey, I literally researched this on a macro and a micro level, to share some of that with our listeners. So I'm very grateful.
No, thanks. And thanks so much for having me on, and for all the work that you do actually in sort of making this movement sort of spread in the Southeast and elsewhere, I'm sure too. So thanks a lot, Nathan.
Yeah, I had my first German client recently, 104th B Corp in Germany. Let's go.
Oh, fantastic. Great.
Helps to speak some bad German. Awesome, Chris. Well, we'll see you in Atlanta in September. And yeah, once again, thanks for coming on.
No, thank you very much. Really looking forward to it.
Well, that wraps up another edition of Be the Change Georgia. We're grateful, as always, for the opportunity to serve you with this content and grow this incredible community of purpose-driven B Corp leaders. If you haven't already, we would be grateful for you to rate this show wherever you get your podcasts by simply tapping the number of stars you think it deserves and sharing it with a friend. This helps us get the word out and continue to use our collective influence as a force for good. This podcast wouldn't be possible without the help from our production team at Chat with Leaders Media. Learn how you can launch your own podcast to grow your business at chatwithleaders.com. Thanks again for listening, and now go be a leader worth following.